Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, October 22nd, 2020, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a 2020 Senate election map 12 days before the election. So we have 35 toss-up races on your screen right now. I have yet to characterize a single race, and the reason why we see a larger than normal amount of Senate elections is because we have a special election in Arizona and Georgia. We have a retired Republican who has vacated a seat in Georgia that coincided with David Perdue's election, and in Arizona, John McCain's unfortunate passing away has opened this seat up to possibilities for both parties to either retain or win control. So all in all, we have 35 toss-up races. We're going to go ahead and jump into just a few that are actually the true toss-up races. So we'll focus on the safe states first. There isn't really too many things different than my previous election map. The reason for that is because since we are getting closer to the election, states are likely to get more solid for their political party. That's mainly just because of the fact that as we get closer, there's less time for uncertainty and things are less likely to change. So if a Democrat was leading here a month ago and nothing has significantly changed, it's not going to change 12 days before the election and probably won't change by the time we actually reach the election. So the Democrats are at 44 based off of all of their safe states. Now for the Republican Party, they have a few more safe states, but they also are working at a disadvantage. The reason for that is because they are at a point where the Senate elections, almost all of the toss-up races are within the Republican parties in terms of being an incumbent or an appointed senator. Regardless of where you're looking, the Republican Party typically makes up the majority of the toss-up races in the Senate elections. And you'll see what I mean after we characterize the safe state. So I believe that was the last safe state. And as you can see, there are 16 toss-up races, 44 safe Democratic seats, 40 safe Republican seats. For reference, the Republican Party has 53 right now. The Democrats have 47, which means 53 minus 40 leaves 13 Republican toss-up seats out of the 16. 13 out of the 16 are considered toss-ups that are held by Republicans. So the Democratic Party has many more opportunities at winning the United States Senate than previously imagined. A year ago, you couldn't really draw a super clear pathway for the Democrats to win the Senate back. It usually would have to go through a 50-50 tie, and while the numbers haven't exactly fluctuated too heavily, there are a number of lean Republican races that weren't even remotely competitive just a year ago, notably Kansas, Alaska, Mississippi, South Carolina. All of these states have shocked us and put us in a position where in January 2020, if you applied that to the map today and you looked at all of the safe states for both parties, well, it was just such a weird scenario, and the election has just expanded to a point where roughly 1/3 of the entire Senate seats of this election cycle are competitive. So let's go ahead and worry about the likely states. These are states that are probably going to go to a certain political party. Since we are so close to the election, this probably won't change. While the race could be narrower, it probably won't be enough to flip. This is the case in the states of Alaska and Texas for the GOP. Both of these states are traditionally Republican strongholds at least. They've shown that they've become a little bit more competitive this election cycle. John Cornyn in Texas specifically is in a little bit of a debacle with MJ Hager, but he has a roughly 90% chance of victory, so he shouldn't be too stressed out. For Dan Sullivan, he has a roughly 3 and 4 chance at victory, but the margin will likely be no pun intended. So if you're wondering about where my characterizations come from, you can check them out in the description box down below. It should explain everything there. The next likely state for the GOP is the state of Mississippi. Now, I know it may be surprising to see Mississippi as a likely Republican state. It is a very solid Republican state, and on the presidential level, I also characterize it as likely. Despite it being safe for the GOP in 2016, in 2012, it was barely a double-digit margin for Mitt Romney. Same case in 2008. And when you're looking at Mississippi itself, it has a very large African-American population, and when turnout is very high amongst that voting bloc, well, generally the Democratic Party does better. Cindy Hyde-Smith was an appointed senator. She won her special election back in 2018 by a mere 8% in Mississippi against Mike Espy. This was following the Democratic Party's performance in the House of Representatives. So at that point, it wasn't as if the Democratic Party should have had the same amount of energy as they did riding into the midterm elections. While I don't think that Mike Espy is going to win this Senate race or even come down to being within a lean margin, I still expect it to be narrower than a traditional Mississippi Senate election. And this year has just shown us that so many things are different. So Mississippi is likely for the GOP. Neighboring Alabama is another state that I would characterize as likely for the GOP. This is a state where Tommy Tuberville, despite only being a resident of Alabama for a little bit under 2 years. He is now on track to become the next United States Senator from Alabama. Doug Jones won against Roy Moore because he was a supposed child pedophile. He still only won by around a percentage point. So Alabama in 2017 shocked the nation when it went blue, but it probably won't shock the nation again and return to the Democratic column. Doug Jones voted against President Trump numerous times, whether it was the impeachment or whether we were talking about, even as recently as now, confirming Amy Coney Barrett. He has been very clear about his stance. And while his approval rating still holds, and while he still is expected to get roughly 46-47% of the vote, Tommy Tuberville is still the clear favorite. So, following all of the likely Republican states, the Republican Party is now tied with the Democrats at 44. But for the Democratic Party's sake, they actually have some likely states in their column as well. In fact, 2 of them are currently held by Republicans. We'll start off with the Democratic states. The first state is the state of Minnesota. This actually isn't too surprising to me. I understand that there was just one outlier poll recently that shows Tina Smith only ahead by 1%, but it is an outlier, and realistically, the GOP has just failed to field strong candidates, specifically in these Senate races, whether it was Minnesota or New Hampshire or Virginia. These are traditionally competitive races, and only one of them is not rated safe. Minnesota is likely for the Democrats. I don't expect it to narrow up any closer than that. So Minnesota is likely. As you can see, Virginia and New Hampshire were considered safe. Had this been any other election year, that would not be the case. The next state that I am actually going to be moving back into the likely Democratic column is the state of Michigan. Gary Peters, while having a polling bump that has narrowed up previously, it has since expanded, and I do expect him to do roughly as good as Joe Biden. I think Biden will outrun him, but if Biden's leading by 9%, he's outrunning a lot of statewide officials. And Joe Biden could easily win this battleground state on the presidential level, and Gary Peters could easily ride the state of Joe Biden's victory to another 6-year term from the state of Michigan. So I'm actually in the state of Michigan right now. I am, I guess, an hour away from Detroit, so that's pretty cool. But I'll tell you that I've seen roughly equal Trump and Biden signs, so I think that's very fitting for the state of Michigan. But Michigan, likely for the Democrats on the Senate level. So the next state that I would consider to be likely for the Democratic Party is the state of Colorado. This is a state where John Hickenlooper, the former governor, is running against Cory Gardner. Now, Cory Gardner has voted with President Trump in terms of where he stands on certain Senate positions 90% plus of the time. That is a very large amount. This is a constituency that didn't even elect Donald Trump in 2016. They voted against him. Hillary Clinton won this state by 5%, despite the rest of the country moving to the right. So Colorado showed that they did not want Donald Trump in 2016, and instead of appeasing his base, Cory Gardner essentially shifted entirely to the right. And that is something that is really going to hurt his reelection bid. He's not the favorite. He was never the favorite to win. And John Hickenlooper, being a formerly popular governor in this battleground state, or not so much on the presidential level anymore, but it used to be, absolutely, he's crushing it in this Senate race. So Colorado goes likely for the Democrats. The next state to go likely is the state of Arizona. This is a state where the Democratic Party has had not too much good luck the past couple of decades up until 2018. In 2016, sure, it did narrow up, but Donald Trump still won the state by 4%. And then 2018 rolls around, and that's when the Republican Party lost a Senate race. Coincidentally, Martha McSally is the same nominee who lost 2 years ago that is up for re-election this time around. How did that happen? Well, after John McCain's passing, she was appointed to be the senator from Arizona. She assumed his position, and then she ended up running for Senate. And it's never easy to win as someone who was just rejected by voters 2 years prior. So since we are working in an environment which is actually slightly more favorable to Democrats nationwide, I can't imagine Arizona gets any more redder from here. And it's not just that Martha McSally is a bad candidate. Mark Kelley is tremendously helping Joe Biden in this state. He's the husband of former Representative Gabby Giffords, a huge gun control activist. He's a former astronaut. There's so many things that Mark Kelley is, there's so many things that he is using for his benefit in this campaign. It's really paying off. I mean, every single thing that we see, whether it's an ad against Martha McSally or an ad for Mark Kelley, they're very strong points. And he's been the favorite for this race for 2 years. Quite literally after the 2018 Senate elections, he was discussed as a potential candidate. In fact, one of my old Senate election videos for 2018, I actually put Mark Kelley as a 2018 nominee at one point. So he was definitely discussed for quite some time now. Kyrsten Sinema, of course, went on to be the next senator from Arizona, but it looks like Mark Kelley will also be the next Democratic senator. It's crazy to see how Arizona went from majority Republicans in the House and 2 Republican senators to 2020 being majority Democrats in the House and 2 Democratic senators, and possibly a Democratic win on the presidential level, a Democratic trifecta in the state. So Arizona is likely for the Democrats. So where do the numbers stand right now? We are at 48-44. The Democrats have a net gain of 1, even though they have lost the state of Alabama. This comes as a result of them winning Colorado and Arizona. Well, as you can see on the map, we have traditionally conservative states that are not considered likely or even safe. Kansas and South Carolina. And Montana. These are 3 states that the Republican Party won back in 2016. The smallest margin was 14% in South Carolina. So these 3 states should not have been competitive for the Democratic Party, and they are very competitive. The Republican Party was the clear favorite in all 3 of these races 7 months ago. If you took a look at the Cook Political Report and their ratings, Montana was safe for the GOP, Kansas was safe for the GOP, and South Carolina was also safe for the GOP. Since then, South Carolina has moved down to toss-up. Kansas has moved down to lean Republican. Montana has moved down to toss-up. So all of these races have become what used to be Republican strongholds that the Republican Party did not need to allocate funds in, that they need to spend a lot of money in order to retain these races. So the state of Kansas is the first state that I'm going to tackle with my lean characterizations because I'm moving it from likely Republican down to lean. I said I wanted to wait for more data. There was no conclusive data that the election was going to narrow up before Election Day, but as we're getting closer, Roger Marshall only leads Barbara Boyer by 4%. It is very possible that these undecided split even, considering the presidential results only showed Trump ahead by 7 points in a state that he won by well over double digits 4 years ago. So Kansas specifically could be much closer than we expect, and I'm moving it a characterization over. While I expect the Republican Party to win there, I don't expect it to be a blowout, nowhere near safe, probably not even likely. Thus the lean characterization. So the next lean Republican state, I would say, is the state of South Carolina. This is a state where Lindsey Graham is expected to do well against Jamie Harrison. Despite Jamie Harrison breaking fundraising records for any Senate candidate in United States history, it's still South Carolina. Lindsey Graham was the favorite even in 2008. He was called at poll closing time, and realistically, he should have not been in a competitive state, in a competitive nature. Nobody really counted in Jamie Harrison from the beginning. While he was a good speaker and he was a very well-known name amongst the Democrats in South Carolina, it's at a point now where in 12 days, it is possible that Jamie Harrison turns South Carolina's Senate seat blue. It's not likely to happen, which is why I consider this state to be lean for the GOP, but it's no longer impossible. 7 months ago, it was more than impossible. So South Carolina and Kansas are lean Republican states. It doesn't really matter the margin at the end of the day because a victory is a victory. Just I wanted to point out that a number of traditionally conservative states are now considered likely or lean. Now, Kentucky is actually a bit of a silver lining for the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell is probably going to win it by larger than 15%, which means that $50 million spent by the Democratic Party really has gone to waste. But again, that's up to people and where they donate their money. Just Amy McGrath has never been the favorite from the start, and her using outlier polls that show her within a percentage point margin when there's 20% undecided voters in a state that gave Donald Trump over a 20-point victory in 2016, I think is, number one, misleading, and number two, bad for the Democratic Party, because that $50 million could have been spent in a number of other states. And not to say the GOP hasn't wasted money on certain Senate races as well, just that Kentucky itself was never really going to be super competitive, and it was just sort of a pipe dream for the Democratic Party. So Kentucky is safe for the GOP. I just wanted to clarify that. It was not a mistake. Kentucky is safe. So that leaves 6 toss-up seats. Let's see how many are held by Democrats. None of them. So all 6 of these toss-ups are held by the Republican Party. So we're going to start off with another lean Republican state and the final lean Republican state, and that is the state of Montana. The state of Montana generally votes for the GOP candidates. While they do have a very strong history of electing Democrats, whether it's the governor elections. In fact, the governor elections, this Republican Party has not won a governor election in Montana since, I believe, 2000 or 2004. This state itself has had a very strong history of splitting tickets, voting for Republicans on the presidential level, then voting for Democrats on the Senate and governor and even House level. But recently, this race has moved a little bit more in favor of the GOP. And while Steve Daines is in a very competitive race with Steve Bullock, regardless of who wins, it'll likely be a Steve that ends up in the United States Senate. Steve Daines is the current leader in Montana, and I think he will win by a lean margin if the election is held today. So the next state that we can focus on is the state of North Carolina. This is a state where the Democratic Party surprisingly has held their lead. Despite Cal Cunningham's scandals, it has come to a point where now it seems as if the voters really don't care. Poll after poll after poll shows that the majority of voters, or the plurality of voters, do not really care about this scandal towards Cal Cunningham. In any other year, they probably would, but this year is not like any other. So many things have happened, and the Republican Party, with President Trump in the White House, is going to have a very difficult time trying to frame certain Senate candidates and maybe even Joe Biden as someone who isn't necessarily family-oriented when President Trump has a very shaky history with that. So the GOP, while very big on traditional and family values in normal election years, seems to have taken a step away from that, given that Donald Trump is also on the ballot. So Cal Cunningham surprisingly has survived that scandal. Obviously, things can unfold. It's within a single-digit race, but at this point, the Democrats are leading. So that puts the Democrats at 49. 4 toss-up races, 47 Republican seats. The next seat that I'm going to move and make it lean for the Democratic Party is the state of Iowa. Now, surprisingly enough, Iowa has moved from being likely GOP, lean GOP, tilt GOP, toss-up, tilt Democrat, which is now lean Democrat. Teresa Greenfield has done very well recently. If the election is held today, I think that Iowa will go lean for the Democrats. If it's held in 12 days, I expect it to go tilt for the Democrats. Regardless, it's a victory, but it's a lot closer on election day. So Teresa Greenfield needs to maintain this lead as we get more information in about a week, which will probably be my second to last Senate election prediction. But Iowa goes lean for the Democrats at this point. That's just the lead that I see for Teresa Greenfield. And I think that, like I said, if the election was held today, she would win this state within 1 to 5%. So that leaves 3 toss-up races. And now I'm going to give the Democratic Party the outright majority in the state of Maine. Susan Collins and Sarah Gideon are in a competitive race. These, Susan Collins has been in for quite some time now. She's been in since the 90s. And her last race, she won by 37%. So the Democratic Party never really targeted her. She's never had a competitive race besides our first one. And even then, it's not as close as this one. So Sarah Gideon is definitely giving Susan Collins a run for her money, quite literally in terms of fundraising numbers. But she is still the favorite. She has been the favorite for the past couple of months. And 12 days to go, that hasn't fundamentally changed. This rating hasn't really changed whatsoever. So the Democrats are at 51. They have the majority, but the Republicans are still at 47. While they are the favorite in David Perdue's Senate race, I am rating Georgia's Senate special election as a toss-up. Now, I know you guys hate that. We are so close to the election, but I realistically cannot make this call depending on who, until I find out who the Republican nominee is going to be. Because if it's Kelly Loeffler, this will be a tilt Democratic seat. If it's Doug Collins, it'll be a tilt Republican seat. It's going to be close. The runoffs are always and exceptionally close. John Ossoff can tell you that. But Georgia's Senate special election is at a point where, there's a proven Republican official who could possibly win this Senate race versus someone who's been accused of insider trading, who's embraced a QAnon supporter. And that's not even a partisan thing to say. Conspiracy theories are very threatening, as we've seen with Gretchen Whitmer, or we've seen with mayors across this country. Those things cannot be taken lightly. And for a Senate candidate to come out and appreciate an endorsement of someone who consistently perpetuates this notion that there is an individual in the government, a part of this conspiracy theory, that is something that is probably going to hurt the GOP. Because Georgia Senate special election is going to be held after the election, which is the runoff at least, which is likely going to boost the Republican Party's chances. I think that they may come out ahead. But I consider it a toss-up because if it is Kelly Loeffler, the Democratic Party will have a lot more ammunition. And even if it is the first chance for it to be a referendum against a newly elected President Biden, it's still very hard for me to see how the Republican Party could even deal with a Senator Kelly Loeffler for a 6-year term in the United States Senate. So there are so many things that need to be unpacked with that Senate special election. And right now, my most comfortable rating is toss-up. It was likely for the GOP because the GOP was the favorite to win both top 2 places. But now that Barack Obama has entered into this race with his endorsement, Raphael Warnock is expected to win in terms of plurality, but you need 50% to pass the threshold. And he could possibly get that in the runoff. But right now, I'm considering this a toss-up. And I know you guys hate that, but it's what needs to be done. So we're at 51 seats for the Democrats, 48 for the GOP. Where are the flips? The flip is in the state of Arizona and Colorado and Iowa and North Carolina and Maine for the Democrats. That's 5 seats. The Republican Party picks up the state of Alabama. That's 1 seat. All in all, competitive races across the country, most of which remain with the incumbent political party. A net gain of 4 seats for the Democrats, 1 toss-up seat, and we will see as we get closer to the election what the actual result will be. But we are 12 days away. Anything can happen, but again, I ask this at the end of every video. The question is, will anything happen? So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my other 2020 Senate election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.